Hello my dear viewers, today we're gonna take a look at the history of Pannonia, people that were inhabiting it and are now living in it. Today I'm gonna switch styles a bit, that is, I'm gonna use the RimWorld style, I'm gonna draw some things myself to just, so you can better imagine what I'm talking about. Also I'm thinking about switching the style of the map, but for now it has to do. Now getting that out of the way, we can jump into video proper. Pannonian Basin is situated in southeast central Europe. If you really cannot pinpoint the place, it's the big grass field above Balkans. Or it is a big grass field part of the Balkans. There's been a debate running for 400 years if it's part of the Balkans or not. I think it's part of the Balkans because it's easier that way. I don't think it's Eastern Europe or Central Europe, just it's part of the Balkans. Although it should be its own thing. As you probably know, Pannonia is surrounded by a lot of mountains, one of them being the Carpathian mountain range, the second mountain range being the Alps, and the third mountain range also being Alps. Great naming. In middle of all of this is a Hungarian plain, or, well, the Great Hungarian Plain, or Little Hungarian Plain. There's a lot of names for it. Also, fun fact, the Hungarian Plain 10 million years ago was a Hungarian lake. And that's about it. I'm not gonna step further into geography. Let's talk about the cultures and kingdoms and whatever happened on our plain. Let us begin in 1000 BC with the most numerous and most famous group of all peoples living in the Hungarian plain, that is most famous in antiquity. East Hallstatt culture, or better known as the Celts, they occupied the terrain of western Pannonia. At the time, the Celtic or Gallic tribes had a vast terrain stretching from Great Britain, France, parts of Germany to the Croatia and Pannonian Basin. Also, some of them later on would migrate into the Anatolia and become Galatians. To the east we have Cimmerians, yes, the same one from the video about Crimea. Those guys are absolutely everywhere, and at the time they owned about the entire Crimea, half of Pannonia. Dacians, which are gonna be in this video, are also part from them descended, and Thracians, who are basically them as well. Although Pannonian Cimmerians, or Cimmerians, however you may call them, I cannot really say their name properly, so I'm just saying it like that, weren't nomadic or semi-nomadic like their eastern brethren. They depended on agriculture and were settled in Pannonia. Least and last, we have Dacians, with their settlements around Pannonia and within it. These guys were extremely warlike, and thanks to that they actually conquered Cimmerians and assimilated them into their culture, because they basically were the same culture, you know, it's like West Slavs or South Slavs type of thing, so they pretty much assimilated each other pretty quickly. And when I say pretty quickly, I mean over 400 years. So let's jump in time. Now you can see what happened to Siberians and what is left of them. Plus, the new wave of migrants from where Ukraine or Central Asia, known as Sarmatians, Scythians or Iazigis, came into Pannonia and started making their own mark on it. But before that happened, the Celts and the Illyrians started fighting each other and mixing their cultures, and that's how we got the Pannonian culture, which is related to the Illyrians. If we're gonna jump 100 years down more, we can see that Celts started migrating towards Greece and Anatolia, and this is the time that Celtic Kingdom of Galatia formed. Because nothing is happening for a very long time, let's jump to the year 80 BCE, or BC, when Dacian Kingdom formed and started becoming a leading power in Balkans. That is Northern Balkans, because in the south, Romans already took Macedonia, took Athens, took half of fucking Anatolia. The Thrace was under the Dacians, which were very powerful themselves. And situation wasn't looking pretty for Dacians, let me tell you that. 380 years later, the first Romans appeared on the Pannonian Basin and started carving their forts. I must say, Romans didn't like their stay in Pannonia. They've been attacked by the Dacians, by the Illyrians, by the Pannonians, by the Celts, by random Scythian tribes running and pillaging the area. It was good old fun time. Speaking about the Sarmatians, Iazigis appear in the Pannonian Basin around 50 to 40 year BC, and they are a rowdy bunch, to say the least. They carved a small territory for themselves, and nobody would actually think that they would last another 400 years in there, harassing the Romans and every single neighbor they had. After the big flop called invasion of Germania by the Romans, well, Germanic tribes themselves started migrating in every direction they could. One of those directions, of course, being Pannonia. First tribe to actually settle in the area was Quadi. They killed the Celts up the north. And the second tribe was Macromani. They are in nowadays Austria. Romans, not to make themselves look weak after the wars with their, well, Germans, they invaded rest of the Pannonian tribes, or Illyrians, and they established themselves on the borders of the river Danube. In 6 AD, Pannonians, with Dalmatians and other Illyrian tribes, engaged in so-called Illyrian revolt. By 9 AD, they were completely crushed, and, province of Illyricum was resolved and split between other provinces into their empire, and the Illyrians themselves were probably just exterminated, just like the Gauls were by the Caesar, or sold into slavery. Not much was happening until the year 102 and 107, because between those dates, the First Dacian or Second Dacian War began, and Rome was, well, a victor in both of these. They took a huge chunk out of the Dacian land or kingdom and established a tributary out of, well, the fallen kingdom. They were extracting a lot of resources from them, and Romans, after some time, actually lost control over the Dacian lands because of the, well, revolts and Germanic tribes being on the border of the Danube, starting raiding the Roman territory, and Romans couldn't keep up with it, so they just abandoned the land beyond the river. Also, when the Romans were busy pulling out of Dacia, a Germanic tribe called Visigoths and Gepids invaded into Pannonia. Although Gepids were there, well, for a long time, hugging the tail of Iazigis, but they never actually tried to invade it so deep and far. The Visigoths did it the best way and the cheapest way, that is, killing the leftovers of the Roman army and destroying the Dacian kingdom. And by 273 AD, the Visigothic kingdom was established, and now it was the biggest thorn in the Roman side. If you were listening closely, you probably heard me say that the Germans started migrating, and that is true, because now they stretch, by this year, from Holland to Sea of Azov. That's how far they got. And soon it's gonna change for them because of a certain tribe from Central Asia. In the upcoming years, by the year 300 AD, the next Germanic tribe settled in the area, and to be specific, settled in the area of Iazigis by dispersing them and making them their, well, subjects or part of the tribe. Those Germans were called Rugi. This Germanic tribe came from north, and more specific from modern-day Pomeranian Poland, which is quite funny why they would even try to go on the border of Danube with the Roman Empire. Was it the climate? Was it the brain rot? We don't know. They just came down south and settled their shop in there. In the year 370, the Huns invaded into Ukraine and parts of Pannonia and modern-day Romania, pushing a wave of migrants into the Roman territory. 10 years later, they attacked Visigoths and Pannonia itself, settling in the area and subjugating the German tribes around them. Huns, after this amazing introduction to European politics at that time, started cooling off a bit and becoming mercenaries for the Romans and Byzantines, who just split off the Roman Empire in 395 AD. Not much was happening for quite some time, except that the Visigoths left towards the Italy, and the Huns behind them, leading an expedition into the Italy in 406, sacking on their way Pannonia and few of the Italian or Roman provinces. In the upcoming years, Huns started pushing onto the Germanic tribes, subjugating them more and more. Not only the Gepids fallen into their grasp, but also Macromani and Quadi. Also, parts of the Pannonia was taken by the Huns as part of their domain. In 445 AD, Attila became the Khan of the Hunnic Empire and led the expedition against the Byzantines, which, well, he won. Byzantines lost a huge chunk of their population in Balkans, plus their yearly revenue into the Hunnic treasury. In the upcoming years, the Huns would defeat the Romans on numerous occasions, but in the year 455, Attila died of a nosebleed, stroke, or being poisoned, and his empire nearly collapsed. That is, freeing the people under his control. Gepids, seeing the opportunity that the empire collapsed, grabbed entire Pannonia for themselves, with few places for the Ostrogoths, who migrated from actually, well, Ukraine, Crimea, into the Pannonia itself. Also, Western Roman Empire got a bit of its land back. In the year 469, Ostrogoths took province of Pannonia and a bit of Illyria out of the Western Roman Empire, started settled in the area. But not for long, as soon they pushed into the Rome itself. As in the year 494 AD, they conquered entire Italy, becoming its sole rulers, and, well, the legacy of Western Rome was no more. We can slow down now a bit, because nothing is happening for another 40 to 30 years, and that is because world peace was achieved, and nothing bad ever will happen. Hehe, just kidding. The new Germanic tribe from Germania, well, so convenient, invaded from the north, called Lombards, invading the Ostrogoths and settling in their lands. Just 5 years later, the last of the Romans, Justinian, decided that Eastern Rome only is Rome in name, and decided to invade Ostrogoths and reclaim the ancient city for themselves, thus starting the Gothic Wars. All wars have an end at some point, and the Gothic ones stopped in the year 554 AD when the Byzantines, or Eastern Romans, which is basically the same thing anyway, won the Gothic Wars and took control of entire Italy, except the Alps. In the year 567, my favorite LARP group, the Gepids, ended their existence because of a group from the steppes called the Avars. Just in 2 years they formed one of the biggest empires of the steppe by just subjugating the leftovers of the Huns or the Bulgars, which basically are the same things because, well, Huns mixed with the Sarmatians and whatever was on steppe, so they became kind of Turkic, and then they migrated back. Okay, I'm not talking about them. In the year 568, the Lombards became a successful migration into Italy, crushing the Byzantine armies in there. At the same time, Avars became attacking the Byzantines in Balkans and enslaving the local populations and, well, extorting tribute from places, but they couldn't take fortified cities or castles, so thanks to that, the Byzantines actually could hold them back. In 580s, the Slavs became their slow march onto the Balkans from the, well, Poland or Ukraine. In 610s, they started settling in the Byzantine lands and, well, killing or misplacing the local population or intermingling with it and creating their own kingdoms. The reason that Byzantines couldn't fight back the Slavs was that the Sasanians were bickering with them over land that nobody actually owned and nobody will, because in the next 20 years a new power will arise called Rashidun Caliphate and sweep both of these powers because they'll be weak, and the Slavs will see their opportunity even before this and start invading into Byzantine lands, selling in the area, and Slavs were very poor, very like primitive with tools and stuff, but they had a great power. And that was numbers. There was so fucking many of them. It just overwhelmed the like big cities the Byzantines have, or they just went around them, settled in the area, and they just lived around the city. And city will just surrendered to them, and it became Slavic over time, or it was well, starved to death. So there you have it. In the year 623, a Frankish merchant selling weapons to the Slavs decided to lead a revolt against the Avars, and well, for some reason he was successful. He actually beaten the Avars and created his own kingdom in the area. But after some time, the kingdom collapsed because he didn't set any clear succession on his kingdom, and it just collapsed. But that happened in the year 659 after his death. Not much was happening until 790s when the Charlemagne had enough of Avar bullshit and raiding, and he led an army against them and destroyed their kingdom. Thanks to this, the new arrived tribe into Pannonia, and well, Thrace, Bulgars took over the Avars and the Slavs that were in the area, thus ending the Avar Khaganate in the year 804. Now, the entire Pannonia was actually incorporated by the Bulgarian Empire. It was only the eastern side, while the western, beyond the Danube, was occupied and controlled and, well, settled by the Slavs. The new kingdom Moravia started to gain power in the region because of the weakening of the Frankish kingdom and their eventual collapse into three parts that they were at the time in 844. 40 years later, Pannonia was also conquered by the Moravian kingdom and incorporated into their realm. Soon it all went crashing down on the Moravians as the Magyar tribe from the Ukrainian steppe arrived into Pannonia in year 895. Magyars quickly pushed Moravians out of Pannonia, and soon after they went after the Bulgars and pushed them out of Pannonia Pannonia as well, thus consolidating the Hungarian Kingdom in the year 900. In the year 908, they conquered entire modern-day Slovakia and started moving on to the Germans, Slavs, and Italians with their raids. Not much was happening for next 100 years except Germans and Hungarians battling each other after Hungarians being pushed back to Pannonia. So let's jump to the year 1003 when the Polish kingdom started expanding and decided to attack Pannonia itself. They took a part of Nitra, that is modern-day Slovakia, and a bit of parts of Hungarian plain. Around the same time, Hungarians became Christian and started settling down in the area instead of having this semi-nomadic lifestyle or nomadic lifestyle in some parts. In 1033, the Poles were finally pushed back from the Pannonia and well, it's gonna stay like that for quite some time. In the year 1103, Hungarians conquered Croatia and finally got to see some sea. In 1139, Hungarians started invading Serbs and Bosnian Kingdom, that was also Serbian at the time. Plus, now they bordered Byzantine Empire, which now they weren't really fond of because, well, they were different religion and, you know, they are on their borders. Like, I want to conquer and they are on my borders, so I gotta attack them, I guess. So that was the situation there for quite some time. After the Fourth Crusade in 1204, the biggest contender on the Pannonia was no longer Byzantine Empire, but Bulgarian Kingdom. Not much was happening for the next 40 years until one small event called Mongolian invasions of Europe. First one and the biggest one being the one in 1240s when the Hungarian Kingdom was, well, obliterated. They didn't achieve much in their conquest of Poland and Hungary, so they pretty much left Europe and maybe one place in Hungary was conquered by them, but most of the place was left and Hungarians and Poles could quickly rebuild and prepare for the next invasions, which weren't as successful as the first one because, well, they were beaten back. And you might ask how the Hungarians did beat the Mongols the second time? They built walls around their cities. I'm not kidding, that's basically what they did. They just employed crossbowmen and built cities and Mongols couldn't do shit. I don't know what happened to the entire siege engineer thing the Mongols had and their tactics in like 4 years or like 12 years. They just all disappeared somehow. I guess that's it for today's video. I don't want to go further than this because not much is happening except Hungarians pushing out of into Moldavia and Wallachia, then losing that grip over those lands because Romanians don't stay in line, and Romanian colonization of the fucking mountain range of Carpathians began before even the Mongol invasions. Then nothing happens for a few hundred years, then Ottomans invade and nothing happens for another few hundred years. So that's why I wanna end it here. I hope I will see you in the next video, or you will hear me in the next video because you will not see me, thank God. Okay, see ya.